In a kingdom nestled among rolling hills and whispering forests, a king ruled with a heavy heart. His youngest son, a child of boundless joy, had been taken by a sudden illness, leaving the king shrouded in grief. The loss clung to him like a shadow, dimming the vibrancy of his once radiant spirit. Days blurred into nights, and the throne, once a seat of purpose, became a cold reminder of his sorrow. The kingdom, though prosperous, felt the weight of his despair, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise. The king, once a pillar of strength, found himself adrift. He wandered the halls of his grand palace, the echo of his footsteps a hollow companion. The laughter of his child, once a melody that filled every corner, had faded into silence. He sought solace in routine, issuing decrees, overseeing harvests, but nothing eased the ache. The world, once a tapestry of possibilities, now seemed a barren plain. His heart, constricted by pain, could no longer hold the warmth it once did. One morning, driven by a flicker of resolve, the king set out to find answers. He had heard of a sage who dwelled in solitude, far from the clamor of the kingdom. This wise one, it was said, possessed insights that could unravel the deepest sorrows. The king, cloaked in simplicity to avoid recognition, journeyed through winding paths until he reached a humble dwelling nestled at the edge of a quiet valley. The sage, with eyes that seemed to see beyond the present, welcomed him without question. The king poured out his heart. He spoke of his son, of the joy that had once defined his days, and of the emptiness that now consumed him. He confessed his weariness, his longing to escape the suffocating grip of grief. The sage listened, his silence a gentle presence, absorbing every word. When the king finished, the sage said nothing. Instead, he rose, his movements deliberate, and disappeared into the depths of his home. Moments later, he returned, carrying a small glass of water in one hand and a bowl of salt in the other. The sage handed the glass and bowl to the king, gesturing for him to take a handful of salt and stir it into the water. The king, though puzzled, complied. The grains dissolved, clouding the clear liquid. The sage then motioned for him to drink. The king raised the glass to his lips, but the taste was bitter, sharp, and overwhelming. He grimaced, the salt stinging his tongue, the water now undrinkable. The sage observed, his expression unchanging, and beckoned the king to follow him. They walked together through the valley, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of wildflowers. The path led to a lake, its surface shimmering under the midday sun, its edges fringed with reeds that swayed in the breeze. The sage pointed to the lake and with a subtle gesture instructed the king to repeat the act. Take a handful of salt and cast it into the water. The king did so, watching the grains scatter across the surface before sinking into the depths. The sage then knelt by the lake, cupped his hands, and drank. He nodded for the king to do the same. The king leaned forward, his hands trembling slightly, and scooped the water. He brought it to his lips, expecting the same harsh bite. Instead, the water was cool, sweet, and refreshing. No trace of salt lingered. He drank again, savoring the clarity, his senses awakened by the purity of the moment. He looked to the sage, his eyes searching for meaning. The sage's gaze was steady, his presence grounding. He did not speak of salt or water, but of the heart. Pain, he conveyed through his quiet demeanor, was like the salt, constant, inevitable, a part of life's essence. Its weight, however, depended on the vessel that held it. A heart as small as the glass, confined and rigid, would be overwhelmed by even a small measure of suffering. The pain would dominate, tainting every moment. But a heart like the lake, vast and open, could absorb the same measure of pain and remain untouched, its essence unchanged. The king stood by the lake, the water's gentle ripples reflecting the sky. The sage's lesson settled within him, not as words, but as a shift in understanding. His grief, though real, was not the entirety of his being. It was a handful of salt, not the lake itself. He realized that his heart had become like the glass, shrunken by sorrow, unable to hold anything but pain. To heal, he needed to widen his heart, to let it stretch beyond the confines of his loss. The journey back to the palace was different. The king noticed the rustle of leaves, the warmth of the sun, the distant call of a bird. These small details, once lost to him, now stirred something within. He began to see his kingdom not as a reminder of absence, but as a canvas of life still unfolding. The people, the fields, the cycles of seasons, they carried a quiet resilience, a reminder that life persisted, even through loss. In the days that followed, the king sought to expand his heart. He walked among his people, observing their struggles and joys. He listened to the rhythm of their lives, their laughter, their toil, their hopes. He found purpose in small acts, tending to a garden, sharing a meal with those who served him, watching children play in the courtyard. Each moment was a drop of water, slowly filling the lake of his soul. The grief did not vanish. It remained, a quiet presence, like salt dissolved in the vastness of the lake, but it no longer defined him. His heart grew wider, embracing not just his pain but the beauty of the world around him. He found strength in connection, in the shared humanity of those he ruled. His kingdom, once dimmed by his sorrow, began to reflect the light of his renewed spirit. The lesson lingered, a guiding star. Suffering was inevitable, but its power depended on the heart's capacity to hold it. A narrow heart magnified pain, letting it consume all else. A vast heart, forged through patience and openness, could carry the same pain and still shine. The king chose to be the lake, not the glass, and in that choice he found not just solace, but a quiet, enduring strength. The years passed, and the king's reign became a time of renewal. His people spoke of a ruler who understood both joy and sorrow, whose heart was as wide as the horizon. They never knew of the sage or the lake, but they felt the ripple of his transformation, a kingdom lifted by a heart that had learned to hold pain and still embrace life.